Hey guys, Vance from the My Latin Life podcast here. Today we have a bonus episode for you. This is my guest appearance on the Agents of Innovation podcast hosted by Francisco Gonzalez, friend of the podcast. Francisco actually previously guested on the My Latin Life podcast. You can check out that episode in the archives. And today the tables are turned. He's interviewing me, and you get to hear a little bit more of the story and overall really fun episode. So without further ado, let's get into this bonus episode and enjoy.
Welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast, where we feature conversations with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and artists. Hello, welcome back to the Agents of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Francisco Gonzalez. And, this is one of the few days I'm actually not in Latin America right now. But I've got on here a great guest today, Vance from My Latin Life. Vance, welcome to the Agents of Innovation podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
And, Vance, it was awesome for you to have me on your podcast. Oh gosh, I guess that posted earlier this year, and
Yes.
so people can go back and listen to that episode if they want. That was a little bit more about you interviewing me about my story, and I was really grateful to share that with you and your audience. But now the tables have turned, and we need to learn a little bit about your story. And so, for people who may or may not be familiar with you, I first came across you on Twitter. Now it's X, right? But you've got a fantastic Twitter/X account called My Latin Life. And for me, it really just, you share so much great stuff about what it's like to live and work in Latin America, maybe even visit and travel different parts of Latin America. You have had many guests on who I have now gotten to know personally. And some of them I've even had on my podcast as well, people like James Nuveen and Jers and other people. And people have discovered me through your podcast as well. So it's been a great setup. But I just learned so much about Latin America through whether it's your podcast or your X account. And so just thank you for all you're doing in that realm as well.
Thank you. We try to make it educational.
That's awesome. Well, Vance, I want to also get your story because my understanding is you live somewhere in Mexico, but that's not where you're from. And tell me, where did the life of Vance begin?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is a semi-anonymous account, so bear with me if there's some details I can't give away. But basically, I'm a Canadian-American dual citizen. Grew up in a couple cold, depressing cities in Canada and the US, and I always wanted to escape winter. And where I kind of grew up, the rich people had maybe a house in Florida and Fort Lauderdale or something like that, and they'd go down there for the winter. But I always had this desire to see the world and a thirst for adventure, and said, like, why not make that winter home Mexico or Costa Rica or, Southern Italy or something like that. And that way you can kind of internationalize yourself more, work towards second passports, internationalize your bank accounts, diversify across currencies, etc. I had a lot of early influences. Jim Rogers was one. Tim Ferriss was one. I'm trying to think who else. And I always wanted to work remote and work online, even before 2020. That's what I did. Is I started working remote kind of before a lot of people. I mean, when I started, there was barely even like Zoom, so it was like a little bit harder, but still doable. And
When was that you got started working remote?
When was it?
Yeah.
I went full-time remote in 2018, so over 5 years ago. And it was something that I was working towards for a long time. I kind of did I tried to check a lot of the boxes that you're supposed to check, go to college, university, get some certifications, work for big companies, and ensure that you have sort of a plan B to that extent. Looking back, I kind of wish I just burned the boats and got started even younger. Because now I went to like an entrepreneurs meetup over the weekend, like 2 days ago, and there were like, 21-year-old millionaires and stuff like that. So things have definitely changed. I feel like 10 years ago, the opportunity set was a little bit different, and now people have like even more freedom. Um, but yeah, I was really inspired by the 4-hour work week and this idea of working online. And I was never a fan of the idea of backpacking, like the idea of just taking 4 grand and like blowing it in Europe over 6 months or something. Like
Yeah.
I always wanted to say, you know what, I'm going to wait until I can work and travel at the same time so that my bank account, so I can see the world, but my bank account isn't going down every month as well. So I kind of waited till I got to that point and preferred the digital nomad life.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting you say that. So if someone's listening to this and maybe they're a young person or wherever stage they are in their life and they're thinking about burning the ships and moving somewhere else to another country, what have you, working remote,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of advice you might give them? Should they have some savings in their bank account before they say leave Canada or the U.S. or wherever they're coming from to go to somewhere, or what would you say to them about being financially prepared in that sense?
Yeah, I would say get that remote job or remote income stream before you leave. Um, you could definitely kind of just take a flight and figure it out while you're there, but I think it does make sense um, to try to get that remote income before you leave. The problem with that, though, is people don't have sufficient motivation because they don't know the opportunity cost. They don't know what they're missing out on. So maybe one way to do it that I recommend to people of all age groups, not just young people, but also families looking to move or retirees looking to move, is to do like a recon trip, to do a sort of sightseeing trip of 2 weeks or whatever you can manage so that you know what you're missing out on, that you know that on the other side there's palm trees and coconuts and pina coladas and all that stuff. Because if you're just sitting in your basement in Cleveland or whatever and you haven't had that experience, you don't really know what you're sacrificing for. So it's tough to be like, I'm going to sacrifice, I'm going to make money online, and then I'm going to go to Latin America. Well, that's kind of the point of maybe a recon trip. Just go crazy in Brazil or Guatemala or whatever for a couple weeks, so that you know what you're missing out on, and then come back to the U.S. and just have demon mode mindset. I'm going to get online income as soon as possible. So definitely a couple ways to do it. I mean, but what I see the most is that people just don't have enough motivation to make this possible in their lives, and so you got to find that motivation somewhere.
So you came from Canada, and but what would you say to someone? Where are the opportunities online? Where would you suggest someone get started if they're looking for remote work and online income?
There's unlimited ways to make money online. And what I would say is don't have shiny object syndrome. Anything will work as long as you stick with it for more than 6 months. So whether that be crypto or AI or programming or remote sales or uh, business operations, whatever it is, just choose one thing and stick with it, and don't jump ship to the new hot thing. Just stick with what you do, become good at it, build skills. Bottom line, if you have skills with the computer, you're going to be able to work remote.
And when you say skills with a computer, what are some of the skills you're referring to?
I mean, like I said, it could be anything. It could be computer programming. It could be being good at sales calls, which primarily happen through Zoom now. It could be Facebook ads or some kind of like, like lots of people are like ad people, or somewhere basically in the marketing funnel of online marketing. I mean, some people just want like a English speaking assistant where if you know how to use Facebook and Google and click buttons on a computer and you speak English, like I can probably pay you a couple grand a month to just like listen to what I say and like do things for me, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
even technically need like a super skill set, but you should eventually be working towards having a pretty unique skill set that's valuable in the marketplace. But there's just so many places to insert yourself. You know, it's kind of going to be based on your personality and what you're interested in, because I think your energy is important. Your energy follows your enthusiasm. So some people will gravitate more towards maybe online marketing and funnels. Maybe some people it's computer programming. Maybe it's some people it's sales. So many different ways to do it, but just pick one, stick with it, and you don't really need much to move to Latin America. Maybe 3, 4, 5 grand a month is certainly enough.
And that's going to get you a pretty nice lifestyle in most spots in Latin America. If you can earn those dollars, right? 3 to 5 thousand a month, and that gets you. I mean, I've seen it a lot, right? I mean, I've been to a lot of places, from Guatemala to Argentina, Colombia, right? A lot of places we know people are at. And yeah, it's great. Sometimes it's nice when you just get an opportunity to travel down there and rent an Airbnb for a week or a month or whatever. And even you're probably paying, a lot more to Airbnb than you would if you were actually just directly renting a place for a month. But even those prices through, say, like an Airbnb type rental, you just notice like, wow, this is like way cheaper. I should give you a funny story with a friend who went and traveled abroad for about 6 months last year. He had him and his girlfriend had broken up. They had been together for 3 or 4 years. He literally lost his job the next day. It was a bad 24 hours for him. But he
or a
decided, hey,
liberating one.
yeah, well, you know what? It turned out that it was a liberating one. I think he was inspired a lot seeing a lot of my travels, and I happened to be down in a group trip to Argentina at that time in 2023, and he shot me a text that he had some news to share with me when I got back. I didn't know what the news was, and that was what the news was. But he said, I've been seeing your travels, and I really want to get out there, but I've been so busy with my job, and I've been so, obviously, he traveled a little bit with his then girlfriend. I remember they took a trip to Italy and things like that. So, he did a little bit of travel like normal people do, a couple weeks here or there a year. But he said, I want to get out there. So he ended up going to Argentina, stayed there for a month, which was like 2 or 3 weeks longer than he thought he was going to be. He went to Brazil for a month. He went to Italy. This guy went all around the world. He went to Egypt. He went to like Thailand. He went to, I think, New Zealand. Anyway, he was gone for like 6 months. He had a great time. But he realized how inexpensive things were, especially in Latin America. So we were getting together in January of this year, and I guess he saw some opportunity that he didn't quite jump on, but he almost did. But he said to me some funny words. He said, he lives in Miami primarily. And he says, it would almost be financially irresponsible not to go to Argentina for a month, instead of paying, rent in Miami for a month or whatever. And he has a job now where he mostly works remote as well. So I noticed recently he was actually in Mexico City for about a week or two. And so, he's made some great friendships in different parts of the world, and especially Latin America. But I've also seen a lot of people jumping on this Latin America bug because it's just like an exciting place to be. Can you tell us, Vance, what is exciting about Latin America? What is exciting? I think you live in Mexico. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the types of places you've been in Mexico, but other places as well. What is the most exciting parts of Latin America?
Oh man. Well, at a high level, one thing I say is that there's something for everyone in Latin America at all stages of life. Maybe for a guy in his 20s, it's dating and partying. Maybe for someone in their 30s, it's finding a partner to start a family, or in their late 30s or their 40s, actually moving their family from the US to escape the rat race, have better health care, more freedom when it comes to homeschooling and things like that. For someone in their 50s or 60s, it might mean retiring with dignity. It might mean having access to long-term care, which is significantly cheaper in Latin America. It might mean stretching your retirement income or your pension in a way where it's going to go further in Latin America. So I really think there's something for people at every life stage in Latin America, and I think it really just makes sense fundamentally for most people. Like unless you're really in the States because you're trying to make $1 billion and you're in person in San Francisco or New York, and I get that. I get that, some things do need to be in person if you want to, like truly build $1 billion company or something. But for everyone else, it's just kind of like living a normal life or whatever. I mean, it becomes a lot easier doing so in Latin America. I guess your original question was like, what's exciting or whatever. It's a good question. It's a lot of things. It's people are much more friendly. I think there's much closer ties between people. People feel a lot more alive. They're not kind of going through this zombie mode thing. It's a lot easier to get a group of people together for a dinner. Maybe in Miami it's like kind of easy, but in Boston or New York or Toronto or something, it's pretty hard to get like 5-10 people for a dinner. Everyone's too busy and has like random excuses type of thing. And one thing people notice is when they come to Latin America, their social life just explodes. They're like, I didn't know it was possible to like be this social and have this much going on and spontaneity and not have to plan things a month in advance. And so, even if Latin America wasn't cheaper, like even if it was the exact same price as the US, I think I would still prefer Latin America just because you feel more alive. It's just more exciting.
It's funny. About a month or so ago, before the group trip that I ran down in Argentina, I spent a week there on my own, rented an Airbnb in Palermo, and one day around 6 p.m. in the evening, I should back up the story and say, I was mostly just kind of doing my remote work from there during the week, and so one day I went down maybe between about 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. and I was in a coffee shop, got some coffee, had some lunch there while I was doing work, and the coffee shop was steady, a few people here, a few people there. 6 p.m. I'm walking down the street, and Palermo area in Buenos Aires, there, pretty young crowd. There's some expats, but really just a lot of young people, young professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like walking by all these coffee shops, and they were just packed at like 6 o'clock in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, my mind was just blown. And I was like, these people, okay, I understand. I'm kind of getting it. I've spent a lot of time in Latin America, so it's not like I was in total culture shock, but it just really was one of those things that made me think, these people they don't work, they don't live to work, they work to live, right?
Yeah, they're
It's
hanging out.
Yeah.
A coffee shop at 6 p.m. in the US is either closed or if it's open, it's dead and maybe there's like a homeless guy.
Right.
And like maybe some guy in the corner on his computer. But like in Latin America, it's like boom, like big groups of people, laughter, fun. It's night and day.
It really is amazing. A lot of things like that. So, I do get it. And, also, it also started to make me get the Argentines and how they're up so late at night. Like, having that coffee at 6, 7 o'clock. It just goes all day. But you're right. But it's also, I think, the spontaneity of Latin America, right? I was just with a friend the other day who took his first international trip ever. And he was in Medellin for about 4 or 5 days with a few friends. And he's showing me a video of, some guy out, kind of panhandling in the street. But, you don't just get the normal beggars panhandling at intersections in Latin America, right? This guy's, juggling knives or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, like I laughed because my first response to him was, welcome to Latin America, because I've seen that everywhere, from Guatemala to Colombia to Argentina. So, but it's like that would just be wild if you saw that on an intersection in New York City, like some guy juggling knives.
Right, breathing fire.
Yeah.
I see it all the time.
I remember seeing a guy on stilts, like you would see at the circus,
Yep.
And I'm like, or even like in Argentina recently, we saw a full band with all their instruments, like go out in the middle of the street and play. And I was like, I never give people money, but that deserves a tip right there,
Yeah, Latin America is certainly mind expanding, right? Because when you grow up in like a certain safe environment, you kind of just think the world is only like that. And when you are put in a new environment, you say like, oh, okay, like not all speed bumps look the same. Or, not, at intersections, sometimes there are people doing circus performances, things like that. And I think it's really valuable to see that, especially for Americans that maybe come from like a perfect neighborhood where all the houses are perfectly painted and in perfect condition, just to go to different places and see that like there are places where maybe everything's not in perfect condition just because the incentive systems are different. Um, one thing I wanted someone one thing someone was telling me this week was they said in Latin America you see full families together.
Hmm.
And in the US, they never see full families like together, like the mom, the dad, and like pushing a stroller together or hanging out in the park together. Like you just don't really see that in the US. You might see some strollers, definitely a lot less because Americans aren't really having kids. But you don't see like the dad hanging out and like the whole like cohesive unit, like the grandma. You're not going to see like a grandma, the dad, and a stroller in the US. You like really don't see that much. And you go to Latin America, you go to any plaza where they're selling ice cream or something, and you're going to see these families together, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, one thing just to add to that is you do see that, and the year that I lived in Guatemala, and I made a lot of different friends there, and you know I mean, let me tell you, every Sunday, every Guatemalan person I knew, that most of the people I knew, are anywhere between their 20s and 40s, um, and they always got together with multiple generations of their family every Sunday.
Yep.
It was like it was like no questions asked. Like it was just where they were getting together, which house was it.
Hmm.
And it would just be a big group, and I would often be invited to things like that. Although I will say, it's sometimes a little bit rare um, to be an outsider from the family invited. But when you are, it's just it's like they're communicating that they feel like you're almost like part of the family. And I was down there actually in Guatemala on Christmas Eve this last year, and people told me, "Oh, Christmas Eve, it's just the families. It's just the families. Like we don't invite any outsiders." But I had one friend that invited me, and I was literally the only outsider. He had his wife and kid, and his brother or sister, uh, his um, his parents, so the grandparents of the kid, and it was
Hmm.
me. And it was awesome, and they had an amazing spot. The other thing, like a place like Guatemala, I mean, just fireworks in any moment of the day, right? That's like the Guatemala thing. Like it could be 11 in the morning and someone's lighting off a firework. But Christmas Eve, let me tell you, I've never seen a fireworks show across the city um, anywhere like Guatemala on Christmas Eve. And these were not the city of Guatemala's fireworks. These were
Right.
people's private fireworks, right? And it
Sure.
was just lit up the sky for like a half hour, just not at midnight, by the way, at midnight on Christmas Eve.
That's sick.
So and also I think you do see a lot of traditions observed, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm Catholic, so it's great. I go to Latin America, see all these Catholic traditions, and but what would you say? Maybe some of the traditions you might see observed pretty regularly in Latin America.
Yeah, I'm Catholic too, so I love it. How they kind of take it a lot more seriously. I'm like, what would you call it? I'm giving away too much, but I'm like Irish Italian Catholic, right? And we're kind of losing this in the U.S. Maybe it's a little stronger in Miami, but we're definitely losing the Catholic traditions, and they're definitely alive and well in Latin America. And there's ones that I didn't even know about. I didn't even know King's Day was a thing, Dia de los Reyes, which is January 6th. And I think maybe every country in Latin America celebrates it a little bit differently. In Mexico, they have a special type of cake that they do only on King's Day, and this and that. So I love the traditions. one thing before we kind of get away from the family unit stuff, but you know, maybe it's slightly different for you in Miami because you're kind of like best of both worlds, but someone who grew up in like normal Protestant America, let's call it, or just like normal, like normal America is you might have first cousins that live in the same city as you, and you see them like once a year on maybe July 4th or something like that, right? And it's like, and maybe other families have this too, where they have like some uncles or something, and they've only ever seen their uncle at their uncle's house. Like the uncle, they've never seen their own uncle just like downtown or like throwing the football or like at the park or something like that. It's like I only see my uncle when he comes over for July 4th or something like that. And it's like families are so just disconnected, I feel, in the US, where in Latin America, like if you have cousins and they're in the same city as you, or even if they live like somewhere else in the state or whatever, like you're gonna see them, if not every week, like certainly every couple weeks, every month. Like people just are the family bond, the family unit is so much stronger. And that's something that I definitely am going to take away the rest of my life. And how I raise my family is more of like a Latino approach to cousins. Like in the US, I feel like cousins are treated as like a separate family that we just kind of know, but they're sort of treated as a separate family. But in Latin America, it's like, you know, it's like your house is my house, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really treated as it's still one family and one cohesive unit, all kind of working together.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. So I wanted to go back to a couple things you mentioned as well, because you said you were inspired a little bit by reading The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I got to tell you, when I heard you say that, so was I. I can't remember when I read it, but it was probably 2012, 2014, somewhere in that time period. And I remember this was well before like anybody was doing like remote work, like very few
Yeah,
people
yeah, I
were
read it
doing it,
really
right?
early on too. I think I read it like 2009.
Yeah, so you were much earlier than me, but what, yeah, tell me a little bit about kind of your big takeaway from that book, and maybe some of the first steps you took after reading and contemplating what he was doing and how it could apply to your life.
Yeah, good question. I think what that book really whispered to me was that you could sort of design your own lifestyle and that there were alternative paths that you could take in life. Because back in the day, if you thought about like say 2009 or even 2012, it was either like you could go be a surf bum in Bali or something, but basically without internet, or
Mm,
you could um, go to New York, Silicon Valley, and try to become successful, right? Or, you know, stay in your town and I guess be like a doctor or lawyer or something, right? And so it was either like there was kind of it was sort of like one or the other, right?
mm-hmm.
And I think what that book kind of whispered to me was that it's probably more possible than people realize to sort of mix these things together where you can sort of optimize for lifestyle. You can live in a beautiful place, but you can still be working towards career goals and still um, care about money and want to become a millionaire or a billionaire while taking an alternate path. And so that's kind of what I took away, where I said like I want to do this sort of like this like new happy medium where it's possible to be like a millionaire surf bum, so to speak. I don't even really surf, but where it's kind of possible to sort of have your cake and eat it too, because um, I don't know. It just I've always had a deep desire to see the world. I still want to go to every country in the world. I haven't really uh, knocked off too many on the list. I mean, still got a lot to go, but I've always uh, wanted to just basically make a lot of money, but also see the world and sort of find a way to combine these two things.
By the way, I listened to the episode you had with the guy that did do that. I'm forgetting his name, but he went and saw every country in the world at some point. He's still a pretty young guy. Um,
Yeah, Henrik Jepsen, I believe.
yeah, what a story! But it was interesting. The takeaway I had from his story was, um, don't rush. Like it's just enjoy places. Like maybe stay somewhere longer, and things like that than you might have previously thought you might. I thought that was really kind of sound advice for somebody who's done it. And yeah, so what a great story. But I also do think it's inspiring that it is possible to do that, but that very few people have actually ever knocked off every single country in the world. It's very
I
difficult.
think there's more now. I think more and more people are doing it. Like prior to 2020,
Hmm.
only I think less than 200 people had accomplished it. But I think now a lot more people have, and a lot more people are getting close just because of how much more common remote work is.
Well, it's funny. You just made me think. When we get off this podcast, I gotta make a recommendation to you of somebody I know who lives in actually lives in Arizona, but he's at over 150 countries. I think he's maybe close to being about 50 years old now.
Hmm.
And it's incredible. He has. I think I met him at least 10 or 12 years ago, and I said, man, as much as I think I travel, I'm just scratching the surface. Like I think I'm at like 31 countries or something. So I sent him. He commented on something I put on Facebook recently when I went to Paraguay or something. He said, "Oh man, yeah, it's awesome." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I'm at 31 now, so I'm just like on your first lap, so, and anyway, he said, "Yeah." He's like, He goes, "You've done a lot, But I think it's crazy to see the amount of people that are able to do that kind of stuff and
Yeah,
travel and see the
historically, it's
world.
always been like a retired doctor or someone with a pension or someone with maybe like some passive income from real estate. I think now probably more younger people are getting into this idea of going to every country in the world. And I've always flirted with the idea. Actually, later today, I'm recording a podcast with another guy named Thor Peterson, who went to every country in the world without flying. He was the
Oh
first
wow.
person to do that. And I guess he took ferries and stuff. I'm gonna have to ask him how he did it. Obviously, he took boats. I guess, right? That's the only way to get from one continent to another. So it's doable. But here's the thing: is when I go interview this guy, he probably doesn't have a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like, how can he probably wasn't really focused on remote work, and I kind of want to be able to do both. Like, I don't want to go to every country in the world and then come back to the neighborhood and I can't even like buy a house down the street from my mom's house. You know what I mean? I don't like that's because no one actually really cares about if you've done every country in the world or not. It's definitely a very internal journey for the most part. So I kind of wanted to balance the two, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Well, speaking of the types of travel, I've I know you and I probably do similar types of things where you might do solo travel. Maybe you travel with your girlfriend. Maybe you travel with other friends.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've gone on group trips. Maybe one day we'll get you on a Fearless Journeys group trip. But
I'm
whatever,
down.
there's all different kinds of ways to travel. How have you been able to balance the different types, and what are kind of the kind of advantages you see out of each type?
Yeah, I've done it all. I've done it lots of solo travel. I've done group trips where like a couple buddies tag along for a couple months type of thing. I've traveled with a girlfriend pretty extensively. So I've kind of done it all. I've spent a lot of time just like doing 1 month Airbnbs, hopping from place to place, and that's kind of how I've always historically done it. Would be like 1 month Airbnbs. I think that's a pretty good way to do it. Some people say they need like 6 months per place or whatever. I haven't really been that way. Like I've always been like by 1 month, you've kind of seen most things and you're pretty down to hit the next city. Um, I don't know what to say. I mean, when it comes to group trips, uh, the thing is, it becomes a lot of work for me because I don't really trust anyone else to do the logistics and the planning because I'm just so much better than everyone at like booking a good Airbnb and like planning things out. But then I end up having to be like the planner for like three, four people, and they're always like asking me things, and ends up being like a second job or something. So I enjoy it. I know they're memories you'll have for a lifetime for sure. But it's a lot of work. Like it's hard to do uh, a group trip type thing when if you have lots of work deadlines and so forth. But I've definitely done it a bunch. I think the carnival month is a good one to do it. Like in February, you say like, hey, we're gonna rent a 1 month Airbnb a little bit before and after carnival in a city. Let's get like some mansion for like 5 people and just try to get people out. Um, and carnival could be in Rio, but it could be in Mazatlan, Mexico, or it could be in Panama or something. So that's kind of a good month. But yeah, I've done it for a little bit everywhere. Um, when I started traveling with my girlfriend, I said like I gave her 2 pieces of luggage. So I gave her a backpack and I gave her a carry-on hard shell roller piece of luggage, like the type that go on the plane with you. And I said like everything you have is fitting in these 2 bags, or you're not coming because we don't check bags here. You know what I mean? So that maybe caused some fright, but she was with it and she travels well. So
Well, it's not always easy to travel that way, but when you're able to do it, you do notice a difference, and you also notice that you don't really need that much. When I start to notice that sometimes too, like, oh man, I totally overpacked again. These 2 shirts or short, whatever it is, like I didn't wear them, and I didn't need them, things like that. So
hmm
it's great, and I hate traveling back with souvenirs. I'm just kind of done with souvenirs. If they can't fit,
yeah, I get fridge
basically,
magnets. I do fridge
yeah.
magnets. My girlfriend does pins, like lapel pins. So it doesn't take up too much space. Um, if I go to Paraguay, I'll buy like 5 kilos of yerba mate. But yeah, I mean that's all you need is a normal size backpack, not some absurd 60-liter backpacker thing. No, just get a normal backpack that has a computer slot and then a carry-on hard shell luggage. And with those 2 pieces, you're good to go. And I've been traveling with just 2 pieces like that for 5+ years.
So Vance, you were born and raised in Canada, right? But my understanding is you had Canadian citizenship, and you also uh, had a dual
American.
citizenship in the U.S., right?
hmm
Tell us about your starting point there at citizenship and residencies, and what have you attained since? And also, are you still a Canadian citizen?
yeah, I'm still a Canadian citizen. I'm just a non-resident, so citizenship and residencies are distinct concepts, right? And it's a little bit different for Americans because there's citizenship-based taxation.
Hmm.
But for everyone else, Canadians, Europeans, Australians, you can become a non-resident, which means you give up your healthcare and some of these things, but you don't pay taxes to that country. So that's kind of where I'm at with Canada. I can still go back and all that type of stuff. I just don't have healthcare in Canada anymore.
And
No,
other than the cold weather, the real negative thing on Canada these days is the taxation, right?
yeah, well, it works out really well, honestly, especially for Canada because um, if you can spend less than 6 months a year in Canada and you don't make money in Canada, it's very easy to be a non-resident. And it's very easy to spend less than 6 months because the weather basically sucks, like 7, 8 months of the year. Um, so it's kind of a no-brainer. So yeah, so I guess my kind of story with the passports and residencies is, um, grew up as a dual citizen, Canadian American, and kind of learned this idea of geo arbitrage just from going back between the Canada and the US. When I'd go to the US and I was a little kid, I would buy cartons of cigarettes, and then I'd come back to Canada and I would sell the cigarettes at my school. Uh, and it works out to a pack of cigarettes in bulk would be like 250, and then I'd come back to Canada and I'd sell them for like $10, right? So I was making like good arbitrage, and I arbitraged other things too. I'd buy alcohol in the States, bring it back. I'd buy electronics sometimes, like iPods when they were big. I would buy used iPods in the States and then bring the iPods back to Canada and flip the used iPods for like double, things like that. So I was always aware of geo arbitrage. And when I read Before Our Work Week, it resonated. Maybe that's why it resonated with me so much. It was because I was already at that point geo arbitraging. And I said, like, okay, now I get how I could apply this same concept with Mexico or with the Argentine peso. And actually, Argentina was the example that Tim Ferriss used in the book, because he went down there and learned tango and became like a tango champion or something. And his favorite wine is Malbec and so forth. So I understood the geo arbitrage concept right away because I was applying it. And I started looking into citizenship by descent, managed to get a couple citizenship by descents for me and my family from more than one country based on our ancestry. Like 2 different European countries where we were able to get citizenships for. But those things took a long time, right? Like, collecting all the documents and applying and hearing back. And so they were multi-year processes to get these citizenships by descent. And in that time, I was on the forums and different like websites back in the day, escapeartist.com, Sovereign Man, things like that. And that kind of introduced me to residencies. Like basically once you've exhausted all the citizenships that you can get, well, you should get some residencies too. And that kind of put me onto how residencies in Latin America really are the ones that make the most sense. Like they have the lowest requirements and they're the most easily attainable, and maybe you don't have to even spend like the whole year there. Whereas in Europe, like nothing really seemed attainable from a residency perspective. I was like, okay, maybe I could do Georgia or Montenegro or something, but I don't know. Seems kind of meh. But Latin America was like a world of opportunity. It's like, okay, I can get Mexico residency, I can get Paraguay, I can get Panama, I can get maybe a couple more. And so that put me on that path. I got Paraguay residency really early on, I think 2019. So I've been a Paraguayan resident for like 5 years now, longer than pretty much anyone else. I mean, obviously it's become a lot more popular since then. So it's kind of like one of the first. And yeah, I'm actually eligible for citizenship in Paraguay. I just need to go down there and get that process kicked off. But yeah, so long story short, started collecting a whole bunch of residencies in Latin America. I'll still do 1 or 2 where if it makes sense, but I already have a bunch. So at this point, I have 3 passports. I have residency in, I think, 6 countries. And so I'm already pretty solid, but some of those residencies will convert into citizenships, and maybe I'll have 5 or 6 citizenships, 10 years from now.
That's fantastic. So do you have the EU passport?
I do, yeah.
That's great. So you're having this whole discussion there about geo arbitrage, and just in case that's a new term for people, that's basically just kind of the idea that you kind of take advantage of the difference in cost from one place to another, right? Maybe also, some people like to say from the U.S. or something that go down to Latin America, ganar in dólares, gastar in pesos, right? Earn in dollars, spend in pesos.
Yep.
That's kind of the basic concept of geo arbitrage, right?
Yeah, I think anyone that lives near a border like understands this idea. Canadians go to the U.S. to buy gas and clothes and alcohol and stuff. Maybe Americans would go to Mexico for dental work or other stuff, prescriptions and medications. So I think anyone that lives near a border kind of like understands this idea that on the other side of the border, something's cheaper.
So, Vance, you said something earlier in our conversation which might be surprising to a lot of people, especially in the U.S., maybe in Canada. You said healthcare is better in Latin America. What do you mean by that?
It's definitely better. I don't know if you saw this South Park clip that they just put out like this week,
Yes.
where it was Kyle kind of navigating the U.S. healthcare system. So they did a good parody there. But Canadian healthcare is very broken. Everyone knows that. U.S. healthcare is very broken for different reasons. But both systems basically suck at this point, and a lot of people are still kind of brainwashed. They like know that it sucks, but they also kind of think it's, top 10 in the world. And there's this kind of weird paradox where we go, yeah, we're top in the world, but like, day to day it sucks, but like I guess the doctors are good once you actually see them or something. But you don't see them, you get zero time with the doctor. So it's like this whole weird thing. But in Latin America, healthcare is really, really good. I mean, the service is good. You can pay cash for anything, and it's really not that expensive. If you have insurance, obviously, even better, but you really don't even need it for most things. I don't know what to say. I mean, I could give so many examples.
So let me ask you something. For somebody maybe who might say, "Well, is that socialism? What's going on there with who's paying for the healthcare in Latin America if it's so inexpensive?"
So I think the term is a two-tiered system where basically every country in Latin America has subsidized public health care, and it's free, but it's not the best. But then there's also private care where you just pay out of pocket, and it's not expensive the way the US is. It might be 1/10 or 1/50th the cost of the US.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really quite good. Like hospitals in Latin America are basically just as advanced as the US. Like they got all the same machines. The lobby looks the same. You know what I mean? Like you go into the doctor room, the waiting room or whatever, it all looks the same, and then the machine they give you is the same, and the drugs they give you are the same. So it's really like all the same stuff at this point. A lot of doctors studied in the US or speak pretty good English, or at least enough to get by. Let's take something as simple as going to the dentist. So in Canada, the US, you have insurance, and it's like this weird thing with the copay, and then it looks like the full dental bill is like $1,000, but you pay maybe like $240 out of pocket, and it's like a little bit confusing, but whatever. I mean, it looks like insurance covered most of it. But you go to Latin America, $45 out of pocket for the cleaning. They don't force you to get x-rays. They just do the cleaning, and that's it. So $45 cash. I guess if you have insurance, great. I mean, you don't even really need it. I remember when I was in the States, I wanted to go get a cleaning, and they said you can't get a cleaning without x-rays. I'm like, why? I just want you to clean my teeth. And they go, oh, well, it's a liability issue. We could get sued or malpractice or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, I have these x-rays from like 3 years ago. And they go, no, it has to be less than 2 years. So we need new x-rays. I'm like, okay, well, how much are the x-rays? And then they go, whatever, like $400. I don't even know. And it's like, God damn, like I just want to get my teeth cleaned. Like, what is going on?
It's amazing when you talk about that in the U.S. healthcare system. Oftentimes when you ask that question, how much, they don't even know.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They have to call an insurance company, or they got to see which insurance do you have.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you have that insurance? That's what this costs. So it's like, there's not, I think there's a lot of people in the U.S. trying to get us to a point of, can we just have a regular menu of prices, and then you can figure out the insurance? But basically, I think what's going on here is on the other end is you have the insurance company in between the relationship between the doctor and the patient, and it really should be that way. And I can testify to your example with the dental cleaning. The university that I actually worked at, Francisco Gonzalez, they have a medical school, they have a hospital, and they have a dental office, and they actually have a dental school. And so I had heard from somebody who had come down, and they actually, one of the travelers that have since come on my trip, but I've known them kind of through UFM, but they're Americans. They live in Washington, D.C. And one of them needed some pretty extensive dental work, like some almost like a minor surgery. And he was like, he comes down to Guatemala once a year and has a regular dentist that he meets with there that it's like you said, it's like 1/10 the price that he would pay. And then so I said, oh, let me go get can I just get like a normal dental cleaning? What is this going to cost? And literally, it cost me $25. And if I wanted the X-ray, and I did do the X-ray the first time I went there, and it was like another like $25. It was like nothing. So if I don't need the X-ray, my dental cleaning is $25. There was no insurance in the process at all. It was just, that's what it was. And it was incredible. And I had kind of a little bit of a back/sciatica issue when I first went down to Guatemala. And after being there about a month or two, I did have an insurance plan through, it's basically through Blue Cross Blue Shield for international travel. That was like, hey, I'm gonna be down there for a year. And I think it was through their company called Geo Blue. So technically, I had insurance through this U.S.-based insurance company, but it covered me specifically for Guatemala, and it was actually pretty cheap. It was like probably 25% of the cost of my, because I just kind of gave up my, I just said I'm living abroad for the next year. So anyway, I got in to see this orthopedic, and it was ridiculously cheap. And then after 2 sessions with him, he said, hey, I think what you really need to do is see a physical therapist. And I went to this physical therapist for 4 sessions, spent like an hour with her per session, and it was like a total of $100 for the whole month. It's like that
Right.
I would never get that kind of treatment. And it was so personal as well. And
Yeah.
it was so inexpensive. And it was, like you said, it was high. Like I was in a
It's
high
more
tech
humane.
hospital.
It's more personal.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just the cost. It's like the convenience, like setting up the appointments is easier. The time that you get with the doctor or the person is better. It's more humane overall. I mean, even making an appointment in the US or Canada is just a hassle. Like you call and then it goes to voicemail and then you leave a message and then they call back and you miss the call. And then it's like, well, do I send an email? And like the whole thing's a mess.
And to your point, that orthopedic I had was trained. He went to a medical school in the U.S. as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and spoke great English too. So it was all around great. But yeah. Anyway, I think there's just different things. One thing I wanted to ask you too, Vance, is I don't know how. I think if you want to talk about this, it seems to me that a lot of people like yourself who are living and working in Latin America, maybe it's just the ones I follow on Twitter, I don't know, are also very much into Bitcoin or some kind of crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Some are into that space from a business perspective, investing in it. Some maybe are into it maybe more from a philosophical perspective. Are you into that space at all? And what can you tell me about maybe the sovereign individuals living outside the U.S. that seem to be gravitating more towards Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I guess this will have to be the last question, by the way, Francisco. I only got a couple more minutes here. I got a call at the hour. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest in crypto. Our podcast is sponsored by BitRefill, the My Latin Life podcast. So I guess shout out to my podcast and to BitRefill. I accept crypto for people that want to have services with us, whether it's a residency or a mentorship or whatever. So we accept crypto. I haven't gone too much further than that in terms of like investing in meme coins and this type of stuff. I just kind of figured it was very not all or nothing, but like you really want to dedicate time to doing it right, or you might just kind of screw it up and get hacked or not sell at the right moment type of thing. So I think it's an incredible opportunity for people to kind of get beyond the 9 to 5 and kind of reach millionaire status at an accelerated timeline. So I think it's a great opportunity for people. For me, I've just been focused on other things thus far, but I really keep kind of like playing with this idea, like, what if I just like went all in on crypto and made that my vehicle to wealth? But for like Latin America, for crypto people is a no-brainer because there's just so much more freedom from government, and a lot of countries have territorial taxation, which means that they don't tax income from non-national sources, for example. So if you were, say, a resident in Guatemala and you made your money outside of Guatemala, you don't have to report that in Guatemala. And so that way people can pay zero tax on all their income. that's foreign sourced, including on their crypto income. So I think what we're seeing is that in the West, governments are increasingly tyrannical towards crypto because honestly, it's just going to completely screw their ability to raise taxes and to pay for the services and pay for the debt, honestly, that they've accumulated in these um, high debt Western nations. Whereas in Latin America, it's much more chill. They don't care about it. So most crypto people, maybe they go to like Dubai or something, but Latin America is just as viable and
So are
option.
you basically saying that in a sense the authoritarianness of governments that are kind of anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin, that's kind of pushing people to move abroad? Is that basically what you're saying? So that
Yeah,
they
I'd
can.
say I'd say a big portion of the digital nomads these days are crypto enthusiasts.
Interesting. Okay, well, this has been great, Vance, and thanks for your time. Can you just tell our audience maybe one last time where they can follow you, find you, connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So it's My Latin Life on all platforms, YouTube, Twitter, where we're most active, and all that good stuff. Our podcast has about 200 episodes. You guys can go listen to the Francisco episode as well if you want a little bit more on his background. But that's pretty much it, Francisco. Thank you for having me. I'm excited we finally made this happen.
Yeah, thank you. I will link to all of those things you just mentioned in the show notes here. So if people are listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever they listen to podcasts, or I guess I'll post this on YouTube, even though I don't have you here on video, since you like to live that semi-anonymous lifestyle down there in Latin America. But we will post all that. I'll even post a link to my episode with you, so if people want to check out that as well. But yeah, I just find you're one of my favorite accounts on X. I mean, every day just seeing. By the way, I've been to so many places in Latin America, and yet your X account also serves to introduce me to so many places I either have never been or never even heard of, like maybe like a little town in Mexico or
Uh-huh.
something like that. So it's really fun to see that. And I know that you're legit because so many things, places I have been or things you're tweeting, I can verify them, and sometimes I even comment on some of your your
Yep.
things and say confirmed. Iguazu Falls was better than Niagara Falls, right?
There you go.
Uh, Things like that. Even though Niagara Falls is amazing, but I saw your post the other day about that. But Iguazu Falls was just some other level down there on the Argentinian and Brazilian sides. But yeah, thanks again for being on and the Agents of Innovation podcast, and thanks for being an agent of innovation yourself. And we'll see you online.
Hey guys, Vance from the My Latin Life podcast here. If you've made it this far in the episode, you're probably interested in internationalizing and living abroad or investing, diversifying into Latin America, or at very least setting up a plan B, as everyone should. So we can help you implement your internationalization strategy. All you have to do to get started is book a call with us. There's going to be a link to our Calendly where you can book a call. So look for that link, look for it right now before you forget, and let's not waste any more time. Let's start implementing your internationalization strategy, building your plan A or your plan B, because these things take time, right? It takes months to do the paperwork and all this type of stuff. So let's get moving ASAP. We're ready when you are. Book a call. Lots of ways to get in touch and get started with My Latin Life, and we'll speak to you soon.